Boom! Daily Boy back here again with another one for your last two videos. We was talking about something and something. Go check those out. We talked about it's not it is Islam. That's one of the things where we put out a bunch of arguments to suggest that you can't take out Islam out of the equation of all the things that you're seeing in the world tragically and those type of things, because oftentimes the argument is it's not Islam, it's political. Then we talked about it's not the West, because that's another argument that people make a lot of times. They're like, yo, the only reason all these other countries are in turmoil and whatnot is because of the pillaging and robbing and whatnot of the West. Now, those topics are more nuanced than you think they are, because they're like 2 hours long almost videos, and nobody really watches them videos for that long, but it's okay. We got another long one for you today, though, you know what I'm saying? So feel free to click off one time. I'm just kidding. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? I think it's important for us to really take the time to go through the information to really be able to understand what we're talking about, anyways. And so that's what Daily Boy is gonna do today. This video is called Suicidal West. You know what I'm saying? I got a lot of information to go through, so we're gonna get right into it. You know what I'm saying? First argument I'm gonna make is there's a bunch of policies and things that we have in place here in Canada, US, the West, everywhere, that don't seem to make any type of sense when you talk about human survival and thriving and, all this other good stuff that we're talking about today. You know what I mean? And it don't make sense. It's like, why would we do things that are counterintuitive to our best interest? Why would we do things that are killing out our own population? Why would we do things like outsourcing a lot of our jobs and not taking care of our own personal interests and those type of things? Not to grow and to help ourselves to develop, not to stay as the sort of like superpower of the earth, to make sure that we always able to lead and keep control, and so that we always be able to ensure our own survival and all that type of stuff. And there's many answers as to why that is. You know what I'm saying? One of the arguments I'm gonna make actually today is there are outside influence looking to destroy us, and that's why some of these policies are in place, and so we're falling for the tricks. This is something that happened historically over and over again. The Marxists and anarchists and these type of people, and our enemies, the people that don't see the world through the same lens that we look at the world, that want to change the way that we operate, wants to usurp our authority, wants to basically dominate us and rule over us, and they think they have better ideas of as to how our civilization should go, are trying to. And then sometimes it's because they hate us, because, you know what I'm saying, like, there's been across the globe, there's been like sort of like black and white states, if you will. There's been places where there's pieces on the chessboard of the universe that historically had tensions with each other, or just have, it's usually ideas, man. It's usually philosophy. It's usually I what do you call it, what's the word I'm looking for, ideology. You know what I'm saying? That's a word you probably heard a lot if you were looking at Daily Boys thing. And that's what really all of the fights and all of the strives and all of the things that happen in the world are basically about. Sometimes we have other sins behind it, greed and money and lust and power and all this type of stuff, but in general it's different. What we're seeing playing out on the global scale is there's different competing ideas for how the universe should run, who should be in charge, or like what should be the rules, and what is going to lead to ultimate human flourishing. And so these competing ideas are usually looking to infiltrate and whatnot, and you got tensions between them. And then you got people who are launching now something that we call the Cold War. So what is the Cold War? It's like a real war, except without bullets and guns. It's like, through infiltrating the minds of your people, through infiltrating the thoughts of your people. Same thing, basically. Infiltrating, the systems and the governing systems, and trying to win out that way. Democracy, all this type of stuff, trying to use it to like try to sort of pan out and take control and those type of things, rather than trying to control and to rule out of any other means. like actually dropping bombs on a nation or something like that. And so that's what you got playing out in the universe today. I'm gonna just take a look at some policies that you've heard of. Defunding the police seems like a stupid idea, you know what I'm saying? Your police systems and whatnot are usually the system of justice in your you know in your society, and they usually are there to ensure that a society is able to thrive and have rules and have laws and systems in place to protect people. Generally, a great place that has a healthy police department and system. So you have countries that are a little less fortunate, and they're not able to pay their officers correctly, and so you've got officers that are taking those positions that are generally the least qualified in those societies, because somebody who has better sense is able to get a better job, to do something better for themselves, and to be able to earn a lot more money than most people are able to earn. So the people that do take these positions are the kind of dunce thugs or something like that, the youths that came out of school that barely could graduate, that can't really do, and they're the policing class. And so because not a lot of honorable people who had a lot of skills and high intelligent level are taking those positions, then you've got a poorly policed state. This is where you got massive corruption, where people are taking bribes and doing all types of stuff on the road, and just it's wild. It's wild, wild west. You want a healthy police system. So defunding the police seems like a dumb idea if you want a thriving society, if you want a society that's built on justice, if you want to feel safe walking around your streets, if you want to feel safe leaving your car outside, if you want to know that you could have even other things like insurance and all this type of stuff. You know how high your insurance would be if there was a place where people are just stealing cars willy-nilly, where there was no justice system, there was nobody to enforce the laws, you know what I'm saying? Where you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you would have to fend for yourself. You would have to, I don't know, and it would be the wild, wild west all over again. So that seems counterintuitive, counterproductive, and just downright stupid. So what would push a people to want to do something like that? That's one we got here. Releasing criminals. This is something we've seen a lot. We've seen Arena, I believe her name was, and we've seen that one lady recently that got lit on fire on a subway station or something like that. And we see that, I think that guy had like 70 something arrests. The Arena situation, I'm not pronouncing her name correctly. She was someone who was stabbed. That was that girl, that little white girl that was stabbed right on her back of her shoulder right there by a guy from behind her, in a bus or subway station, something like that, train or something like that, some kind of public transit. And that guy had like 14 priors, and we've been seeing a lot of that. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that people are trying to pat the statistics, you know what I'm saying? So when let's say you're governing a place and you're trying to say crime went down, one of the ways is to actually fight crime, which is actually pretty dirty. It's a pretty dirty job. Now, if you do it correctly, you do it right, you stomp it out, it's done for now, you know what I mean? But you have to go through that process of actually stomping the thing out, which is not a pretty sight, by the way. For the most people like this type of stuff, they don't want to see it. I talked about immigration reform and these type of things is a lot like chicken. You know what I'm saying? People like chicken. They want to eat chicken. They like beef. They want to eat beef. But the people who don't want you to eat beef, like the vegans or something like that, those are the only people that will stop to take the time to show you how the meat is actually killed in the factories or something like that. They're showing you these cows packed up, and pigs and ducks and chickens, and they're being slaughtered, and the blood and the gore and all this type of stuff of it. It's a messy process. I like eating chicken. I don't like killing chicken. I don't even like touching raw chicken, to be honest with you know what I'm saying? So I get it, you know what I'm saying? Everybody wants immigration reform. Everybody wants the justice system to operate well, but nobody wants to see it take place. You don't want to see a dad being separated from his kids. You don't want to see this type of stuff, you know what I mean? Because it's not pretty. It's not a good sight. It's not cool. It's not one of those jobs that you like. You know who I rate? PSWs, big up yourselves wherever you guys are, because PSWs are some of the realest people in the world, bro. The jobs that they do are not jobs that people want to do, you know what I'm saying? But it's necessary and it has to be done. That's how the criminal justice system works as well. You got to have justice in a society, you know what I'm saying? You cannot keep one of the arguments sometimes is, and I was saying earlier, they've released you can either fight the crime or you could just ignore it, and then next year the statistics shows that a lot less people were arrested. So you're like, oh, crime went down. And then the states that are actually people are saying this about are like, what are you guys talking about? Crime is rampant in the city. It's way worse. But when you look at the stats are showing that crime went down. Why? Because they're finagling the numbers by basically just saying that you know by basically releasing criminals, by basically not charging them, by basically not letting some of the charges stick, and so you got people getting released 70 something times, and in a lot of the cases with violence. And then so what you expect now? Your society, you're innocent, you're hardworking, you're people who are paying bills and paying taxes and stuff like that are getting murked out in the streets because you're not holding on to the criminals in the criminal system. Now, what kind of mind state, what kind of ideology, what kind of people would do something like that? You know what I mean? Then you got the people who are just crazy, right? Everyone, and to a degree, almost every criminal is kind of crazy. Like when I'm talking about mentally unstable. They always say whenever you see certain crimes, you'll hear people say, "Oh, well, that person was struggling with mental health." Yeah, dog. Yeah, right. Of course, like he murdered someone. Of course, he was struggling with, you know what I'm saying? Almost everybody involved in some sort of criminal activity can pan to this mental health issue. And the way how mental health is looked at now these days is like, oh, they had trauma and drama and stress. Let me tell you something, bro. Like everybody almost has those type of things. But the argument, even as is not a good argument for leaving them out. If you're telling me someone doesn't have control over their violent acts or their mind in a way where they can swerve their like most intrusive thoughts to stab someone in the neck, guess what, bro? That person does not belong on the street. So take them off the streets anyways. Whether you gotta put them in some correctional facility. I gave my opinion of what should happen. Again, I'll just reiterate real quick. I don't think prisoners should live off of taxpayers' dollars if they was in the prisons. You know what I'm saying? You got to put in some guardrails so greedy people don't take advantage of this and try to jail people just so have them working for like near free. But it should at least sustain itself. Like prisoners in jail should work. From jail, there should be some kind of system where they can earn their own living in jail. I mean, I'm talking about like paying for the facility and paying for, you know what I'm saying, their own food or whatever they need by like whatever factory job or something that you could run out of these prison or industrial system. If someone has a good argument for against that I haven't thought of yet, and believe me, I thought of a lot about it, sure, like correct me on that if you have an argument for it. But I've thought about a lot about it. There's some guardrails, of course, that you'd have to put in, but I believe in that system. So, what would cause a society to continue to release violent criminals into their own society and ultimately cause destruction to their own civilized population? That don't make any sense, right? Let's see. Changing merits for fighting personnels in the army. That's an interesting one. So you got your military people, and they're supposed to be high functioning individuals. They're supposed to be highly physically capable individuals. You want the most well oiled, greased army you can. I'm talking about when it comes to personnels, and changing the merits for entering into the army is kind of crazy, you know what I'm saying? And they were doing this for women and other people. They were basically letting them run less kilometers. They were basically letting them pass the tests on lower levels. They were basically doing this through some kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion thing. I'm gonna make a DI video one of these days, but it's just stupid, bro. You know what I'm saying? This is your military is your, like, even if the military is sitting there not doing nothing, having a strong military is how you negotiate, is how you have weight in the world, is how people respect you when it comes to like deliberating and making trade deals and all kinds of stuff. And so for someone to just totally ignore that and weaken their own military force. It doesn't seem to be something that makes a lot of sense. And so, since these are some of the policies again that we're looking at, that is kind of crazy, if you will, you know. Fifth, make your men and women infertile. Man, like, yo, we got fertility rates dropping, and this is going to be a larger conversation about population replacement altogether. I do have a video on population replacement where I focus on three different issues that I think is leading to the problem. And so if you guys want, go check out that video. But you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of foods and chemicals and all kinds of stuff that's leading. You guys look this up, look into the things that I'm talking about in the background. You'll find a whole host of information to suggest that our society has been essentially committing suicide through our fertility rates, right? Six, pitting men and women against each other. What kind of society do we got, bro? Why is men fighting women and women fighting men? Aren't we supposed to work together? You know what I'm saying? But we've fallen into a trap of seeing each other as enemies, feminism and masculinity, and like, you know what I'm saying, bro? We're supposed to be the perfect symbiotic, you know what I'm saying, relationship on earth of love and like productivity and all this other good stuff. We're supposed to complement each other, not fight each other. So what kind of society does this to their people? Why it's a classic divide and conquer thing. Seven, incentivize separation of families through benefits. Bro, one of the things that I found out is apparently our society, you know, the way how we do social benefits, which seems to make sense, is actually incentivizing separation of families. Because a lot of times women are looking at it and they're like, bro, if we're not married, I get a lot more money from the govy for my kids and for my living and stuff like that. And so some of the laws that seem there's some reasons behind this as well. Like, it seems to make more sense that like someone who is alone would need require more assistance. But then when you look at the incentive, when you look at the job market and how much money you can make and stuff like that, and even staying on social assistance, a lot of times, you know, you would have to find something really kind of lucrative in order for it to make sense for you to stop staying home and chilling with your youths and taking care of your youths and taking care of your family, or making more babies outside of marriages and stuff like that, in order for you to even take that job, because you lose the social benefits and then it becomes kind of crazy, right? And so that's the double whammy. It hurts the system, it hurts the taxpayers' pockets, it hurts the individual who then is incentivized to not be in a committed relationship with someone. It hurts the kids involved because now they're robbed of having a father figure in the home. It hurts. It's a universal L. Anyways, it's like, again, think about what kind of society does that. 8, funneling your women into systems that can barely, so that they can barely reproduce while becoming boss babes. That's how I got it written down. Sometimes I wonder myself at how I write this stuff. But at the same time, what this is we got women climbing up the social system all the way, trying to, you know, climb the ladder, the corporate ladder, and then, you know, maybe even from the university standpoint, those type of things, and then getting into this position where they need to get enough money to get a house, to save up for a wedding and all this type of stuff. And this is leading a lot more people to get married in that, like, you know, late mid-30s section. And you know what I'm saying, it's definitely one of those things that, you know, your fertility, like as a woman, you know, you're born with the amount of eggs that you're gonna have, I believe. And you know what I'm saying, like after 35 it gets a little bit more difficult. This also ties into the infertility and all the type of stuff, but it causes a population replacement deficit that is destructive. This is something that's far more destructive than people understand, because there's nothing more pressing that's more immediate when you think about, you know, like just deaths or dying or killing off yourself, that type of thing, right? You're thinking about, like, you might be thinking about, oh, drunk driving, you might be thinking about drugs, you might be thinking about even abortion is really high up there on the list. But actually, population replacement is crucial, bro, because it is what it sounds like. You're not replacing your own population, and then if you're under that population replacement rate, you're basically dying out as a civilization year after year, generation after generation, and it becomes something that's unfixable. You know what I mean? After a certain time, because to play catch up after you haven't got a couple of generations where people are not having as much kids as they need, you're basically dying out. Literally, your civilization is killing itself. It's dying. It's suicidal. It's crazy. And it's like, why, again, are people doing stuff like this? Why is this being incentivized? Why is this something that's happening? You know what I mean? And some people have some good idea. Oh, I just want my daughter to be able to take care of herself, and the university system. You got to reevaluate these systems, bro. They're self-destructive ultimately, right? Let's see, killing babies in the womb. That's another one that goes right there, man. What kind of society? Think about it. You're killing yourselves in droves, bro. If you guys know, I don't remember what her name was, but the lady that was like involved in propagating and putting up abortion was really a racist person, and she was actually trying to kill off the black population, and that was one of the things that she presented as for the reason why she wanted to. And it is kind of working because the black population is mostly involved in abortions, and they have abortion clinics in their areas. They did this with alcohol stores and stuff like that, stemming the population with these type of things. Now some companies are doing this where they're doing the research and they're seeing where to put like these facilities, but there are some aspects of this that is an attack on the population. And so abortion, the way it is right now, and the amount of people that are dying through abortion is kind of crazy. It's self-destructive. It doesn't make sense to sustain a healthy population and to be able to have the younger generation sustain the older generation before them, and to propagate our future into the future in a positive, beneficial manner, right? Number 10, send away your men to die in countless senseless wars, man. So, like, wars, there's a whole industry and weapons manufacturers and things like that. And then you got all these people, and this is sort of answering the question to a degree. Some of the politicians are bought and paid for. They're not working for you, they're working for the military industrial complex, they're working for big pharma, they're working for the food industry, they're working for, a bunch of different industries that are generally profit based. You know what I'm saying? These people are not really trying to care for you. Now, to a degree, it's sinister, but it's not intentionally sinister, although it works out that way because what happens with a lot of these companies and whatnot, they got a board, they got a couple of men that are in charge of the board, they got an IPO, they got like stock investors and things like that, and their whole job is to make sure that their stock investors profit. They work for the stock investors. Their whole job is to make sure the company profits. So these guys, they sit up in a big room with a big oval table, and someone comes in with a big chart and they present ideas to these guys day in day out as to how they're gonna move, how they're gonna advertise, and if you show them a chart that doesn't make sense financially, you show them something that's gonna cripple their company, you show them something that's gonna, like, they're like, hey, we're standing to make 300 billion a year from prescription meds, and you're telling me you have the cure for blah blah, that's gonna implode the industry. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And if you are a person like that, like where you're saying, okay, we're gonna do da, 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 best believe they're gonna try to clip off your ear like they did Donald Trump's. You know what I'm saying? But that's what happens. A lot of times research gets bought out and scrapped. A lot of times scientists just vanishes off of the face of the earth. You guys might want to look into Nikola Tesla and some of the things that happened there, you know what I mean, to kind of get what I'm saying here. I don't know really, but it creates a nice fog for you guys to look at anyways. But what I mean, for the most part, that is something that is happening, and we have people who are sending off our men and our women and people into wars that doesn't make sense. Endless, like I'm talking about 8 year, like 20-year war and all that type of stuff, you know what I mean? And that does not make sense. And a lot of times they're not getting nothing. They're not even getting the oil. They're not even getting nothing from these wars. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean by countless senseless wars. I'm not against war. Of course, the war is necessary. Of course, you need peace through strength. Of course, you need this type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And of course, being a Christian, you know what I'm saying? All glory be to the Most High God. You know what I mean? Because, there's that aspect as well. But you want to be on the right side of history. You want to be definitely standing up for justice across the face of the globe. You want to definitely be protecting the interest of people all over the world. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times people feel like, justice is only good for the victim. No, justice is also good for the criminals, because the people who are brought to account based on the fact, or even like gone from the earth based on the fact that they've committed certain atrocities, is ultimately a good thing. You don't want to let someone continue down a destructive path. You don't want to give them the way to continue to harm other people and things like that. So you need that structure as well, right? So I'm not against war, just countless, endless, senseless wars. You know what I mean? That we're talking about castrating your children. I'm just gonna read these off without explaining them. With gender reassignment surgeries, come on, we all know what's going on. They're attacking truth. They're basically trying to get rid of truth altogether, right? The minute you start talking about men can get pregnant, you start talking about, oh, well, man can become a woman. They don't even make no sense, right? Talking about like trans men or trans women are women. You know what I'm saying? Why would you say trans women in the first place? Then if a trans woman is a woman, that would be just a statement that a woman is a woman, which doesn't even make any sense. But you have to add the caveat because we know they really are not, right? And so, that's not just a thing, you know what I mean, like a philosophical debate or anything like that. That's just a thing where I'm saying it's an attack on truth altogether, right? Once you win that warfare of convincing people of things so fundamental to human society for years, just like this is just, I don't know, basic. It's not something that we have to articulate or think about very much. It's just a very straightforward truth. Once you can get people to believe things like that, you have destroyed truth altogether, right? 14. Oh, this one says make them all liberal weirdos and let them fight their own kinds. Now, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking about, you got like, right wing and left wing, and you got all of these people who are trained almost, even through their education system, trained all the way throughout their life to the point where they have self-hatred, and they you're not telling them about the full account of slavery and those type of things as something that was universal. You're not telling them about the redeemable characteristics of the people who owned slaves. You're not telling them about the previous regimes before them that had slaves. You're not telling them about the nature of slavery. You know what I'm saying? And then you're turning them in on each other, and you're turning them in on themselves. There's a self-hate from like white, liberal mindsets where they basically are fundamentally, they see themselves as this evil entity on the face of the earth. And you know what I'm saying, they believe this about themselves and their people and their culture and their nations. And basically they have turned against their own kind. They have turned against their own nations. They have turned against their own civilization. They've turned against their own history. They're listening to every other version of history except for their own. You know what I'm saying? And so they're fighting themselves. They're fighting amongst themselves. You got right wing and left wing and liberals and conservatives and the whole nine yards. And you got like, I don't know, bro. Even if someone was gonna stand up for something, if half of their people around them are gonna tear them down for it, they're not even about it. One of the reasons making these videos, like, for me, it's not hard, but like at the same time, I do know that there's lots of people that are going to not agree with me on a lot of these points. And I would say the vast majority of people actually, and they're going to be like, oh, Dale's wrong. And they don't even want to have a conversation with me about it. And if they do, they would try to ridicule my views and blah, blah, blah. Is because there is this sort of like division. There is this sort of like thing, that this gap. And it's like we can't even talk to each other, we can't even, you know what I mean? And a lot of times you get labeled as Islamophobic or racist or bigoted. Let me tell you something, bro. If you care about people, you love people, even if what I think is wrong, if I'm trying to tell you the truth, you should see that as love, bro. And if I was like, if Jesus is not God, and like, you know what I'm saying, and you know, some of these things are actually not self-destructive to you, or are actually self-destructive to you, and I didn't tell you, that's hate, bro. That's hate, not me affirming your views or something like that. That's me hating you, because then I don't care if your soul goes to hell ultimately, because then I don't care about, you know what I mean, what happens to you as a whole, right? Let's see. Take away God as foundation of morality. You know what I'm saying? This idea of a godless nation, this idea of taking away God from the schools and from the like all these other things. You know what I mean? And like creating a situation in which you're teaching people that morality is totally subjective, and they can make up whatever they believe is true and right for various reasons, and you have your own truth and everybody has their own truth and whatnot. Is fundamentally self-destructive, bro. There has to be some grounding basis, even if you didn't believe in God, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? It seems like a good place to sort of build your foundations on. Now, of course, it's better if you actually believe those things, but if you didn't, you know, as a society, it just seems to be a pragmatic way of structuring your society, so that you don't have this subjectiveness that, you know, the world is just, you know, and any action is just, you know, we're all just meat and flesh, and we're all just like chemicals or like biological like firings of like whatever. That's our thought systems. And so it doesn't really matter what you do in the long team. There is no actual moral lawgiver. There is no actual. It is one of those things that lead to what you're seeing in societies today: heavy suicidal rates, heavy like depression, like heavy, like, you know what I'm saying, if you guys look, all of these things have been increasing over times. People's depression, suicide rates, all this other stuff keeps going up and up and up, and it's because of those type of things, right? Tearing out those fundamental parts, building blocks for society. The building block for society, I would say, is God, right? So import direct state enemies of your way of life, foundational religion, and democratic policies, partially based on your self-inflicted performing population replacement rates. Yeah. So okay, underperforming probably is the word that I was looking for. But basically what I'm talking about here is, you know, partially because we have underperforming a population replacement rate, it causes us to be a little bit less discriminate in who we're letting into our societies, and a lot of times we're letting in state enemies. So a lot of times we're like letting people across the borders that really just fundamentally disagree with your religion, they fundamentally disagree with your way of life, they fundamentally, a lot of these people hate you, bro. They want, like, a lot of those people see you as, you know, whatever the labels they label you as, you know what I'm saying, and they hate democracy, they hate, you know what I'm saying. It just doesn't seem to make any sense that a nation would do something like that, you know what I mean. Import people of military age that's like primarily you know, their what do you call it? Anyways, number 20, destroying traditional families based as the basis for a healthy, thriving society. Well, this kind of connects with all the other stuff we talked about, and it also connects with the population replacement rate, but it connects with like the LGBTQ ideology and all this type of stuff. So what we're doing is basically destroying our own family. The family is the unit that is the sort of foundation for our societies around us that ultimately end up forming our nation and our world. And so when you attack the family, when you attack, you know what I mean, the traditional style of family, you're attacking your civilization as we know it. You know what I'm saying? Number 21, constantly oh wait, I already put this one in there. Okay, number 22, well, let's call this number 21 then, shut down and export your means of production to other nations. This is something that seems counterintuitive as well. Like, you got steel and you got coal mines and you got like all this other stuff, oil, that you could extract and refine for yourself, or bauxite and all these other precious minerals and stuff like that. And then people are like, oh, the planet and the greenhouse gases, and they want to shut down their production, their means of production. But then they got to import still, because they're still relying on the oil, they're still relying on the steel, they're still relying on all this other stuff. So then they're importing it from other nations. Again, this is one of those things where you're being sold out. Because if, let me just engage in a little bit of a theory here. Let's say I'm a Chinese steel producer, billionaire out in, like, multi-billionaire out in China, and I want the Canadian market for steel, let's say, right? I'm just using an example. This is not, based on any particular research or anything like that. Just, an analogy, right? Well, you know what? It is based on reality. I'm just using steel as an analogy. So, and I have an interest in tapping into the Canadian market. Then it's easy enough for me to spend some money behind a campaign for a Canadian politician that's basically going to represent my interests when they go in power. So when they go in power, they shut down their own steel mines. Of course, that gets sold to the Canadian public as, oh, look at us, we're progressive. Oh, look at us, we're green. Oh, look at us, we care about the environment. But then you're spending your taxpayers' dollars from your own society, sending it out to the Chinese government and enriching their society, collecting their resources, bringing it into your country, and then using it in your country, and they're still releasing the greenhouse gases into the air, which ultimately is affecting the environment. You know what I'm saying? So it don't make no sense, and it don't. And also, you're now giving up jobs that could be enriching your own society, and you know what I'm saying. And you're making yourself like less self-sustaining, right? So that don't make no sense. Number 22, teaching anti-West sentiments in schools and sympathizing with direct enemies of the West. Why is it that we got so many liberal kind of looking teachers, you know what I'm saying, weirdos teaching our kids, bro, like telling our kids all kind of nonsense that really is like destructive to their own well-being, to our society, teaching them all kind of theories. And like, again, they're not teaching any of the redeemable characteristics. They're not teaching anything good about the West. They're not teaching you anything like, about, the West being involved in all of these other great inventions and things. I talked about this in the past video in length. Why would they be doing this? What kind of a society would invest in doing this? What kind of a society would raise, what would cause a society, is a better question, to raise kids that are ultimately going to hate their own society? You know what I'm saying? And sympathizing with the enemies of their society. That don't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it does make sense if you're clocking what's actually going on, and we're gonna get to that ultimately in this video as well, right? Maybe not. Maybe I'll stop. Actually, this is what I'm gonna do for this video. I'm actually gonna stop at listing these self-destructive characteristics, and then we're going to do another video where we talk about what's actually going on. We look at some of the funding that's coming in, and we look at some of the statements from some of our enemies as to their plans and what they were intentionally doing. And then if you put these videos together, it'll start clocking to you. You'll start to make sense of it all, and it'll be like boom. And then if you put the 3 videos, well, it's going to be 4 now. It's going to be, this is going to be Suicidal West part 1 and 2, and then you got It's Not the West, and you got It Is Islam. And you put those 4 videos together, you know what I'm saying? That's going to be, I don't know, what is that, like 2 hours a pop of your life? So like 8 hours of your life. But it'll start, I think that those things will kind of like, I don't know what to say. it explodes. Like once this stuff starts to come together, it feels like the universe is coming together. You know what I'm saying? You got all this different information just flying in from left, right, and center, and it's just and then it forms like a beautiful planet where now you're starting to like in this analogy, the beautiful planet is just your mind exploding and going, whoa, I get it. You know what I'm saying? I totally understand what's going on in the world. And then when you see things, even in movies and in like art and in like, you know what I'm saying? You're not a victim anymore. You're not just someone who's sitting as an innocent bystander being indoctrinated by what you're seeing, but rather you're able to adequately identify the enemy's plot. And I'm talking about Satan himself up at the top, but like there's other, Satan has a kingdom, structure to what he's doing. He's at the top. He's got some generals. He's got some commanders. Some lower individuals who are out and what I mean and about. You know what I'm saying? If any of them are here, they better bounce in Jesus' name. You know what I'm saying? But let me see what else we got. Number 23, land acknowledgements. This is one I kind of particularly don't like. Say this it's okay in a way, but like it's kind of crazy to me. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we get into this one a little bit since we're not doing the whole long video today. We'll get into this one just a tiny smidgen, a bit. This deserves a video by itself, but it's weird to me, you know what I'm saying? That like, and this is the one of those self-hate things again, you know what I mean? You got all these liberal types talking about land acknowledgement and yeah, and then we got dudes on our side that will pop up to houses dressed as like natives and say, yo fam, like, land acknowledgement, this and that, get them to agree, and then ask them, yo, so when are you moving? You know what I'm saying? When are you gonna bounce out of that house? Let me in. We got people who are for all kind of illegal immigration and all types of things. And then when people ask them, okay, yo, we got some migrants, can you take them into your house? Even though one, they're like, oh no, resources, this, that, you know what I'm saying? Which really goes against their whole argument. It shows that say they're not thinking clearly, and they're also hypocrites, right? They don't want them in their house. They don't want to take them into they don't want to spend their own money and their resources. They don't want to house them in their little extra room or keep them, you know what I mean? But they want them in the country. It's the same thing with, and again, nobody here is against immigration at all. I'm an immigrant, you know what I'm saying? But we're for, like, ultimately societies having borders and having rules and having systems in place to make sure that they're governing who gets in and out of their country, and they ultimately get to make those decisions. You know what I'm saying? And there's loopholes and things like that people can enter through. If you're exploiting a loophole or something like that, that's one thing. Now, if some of those stuff needs to be changed in the whole thing, but we're talking about land acknowledgements here, right? One of the things that trips me out about this is, first of all, there is no natives. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless you're talking about a specific area of Africa or something like that where it seems like all humans came out of, there is no original person to any land. Everybody migrated to some land at some point or another, and mostly they fought other people for their right to be there, either while they were there or either, you know what I'm saying, when they came there. You know what I'm saying? So that's a normal thing. So claiming, and then another thing is, this only happens in like certain countries. You know what I'm saying? Every other country, every person that's there, like if you take the whole East, for instance, you know what I'm saying, a lot of those, and I read off a bunch of them in one of my previous videos where I talked about, nations that were once Christian nations that were overthrown and conquered by Muslims ultimately, and Islamic nations, or the Islamic Empire or the Ottoman Empire during those earlier centuries, and they're mostly been Arabized, they've mostly been colonized, they all had their own culture, their own sort of style of dressing and all types of stuff, and a lot of those nations, some of them were Christians. Prior to that, they were like pagan nations, and so these nations have been conquered, and they're known as Islamic nations now. And nobody says, okay, well, where's the land acknowledgement? Well, why don't you give it back to the Christians? How come you don't acknowledge that this is Christian land? And then you say, like, nobody talks about that anywhere else in the world. Why is it that we're doing it here in Canada? Why is it we're doing it here in the West? Why is it we're doing it here in America and all this other stuff. It don't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? I think I got more to say on that, but right now I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, I had more points that I was looking at for that. Essentially, you know, we're all sort of integrated into one nation now. You know what I'm saying? We're all living under the same system, same principles. In fact, usually the natives now these days, what we call natives, by the way, is actually a little more privileged than anyone else. Some people would pan to their societies to be like, a lot of natives have been sort of like affected historically that led them into this state that they're in. Again, this is a victim type state mentality. You were born into this world the same way, and you have sort of the same opportunities, and you have people who grew up with the same challenges that you've grown up with and worse, and that have done better. And so there's always a way out. There's always a way to introspect. There's always a way to think about things so that you put the power back in your hand to make proper decisions, to make sure that you overcome, even if you have to overcome adversities, even if it's a little more difficult for you. It's not impossible. Not in Canada, not in America, not in the West in general. If it ain't happen, if it can't happen here, you can't do it anywhere else. Cause these are the best place to live in. You know what I'm saying? Hands down, no bars, hell. I'm not even gonna argue with you guys. 24. Selling large farmlands, you know what I'm saying, to near military bases. This is something that was happening in the States a lot. You might want to look it up. There's high profile cases near military bases, Grand Forks, North Dakota, 2021 to 2023, for the Fu Fang company, so just look that up. I'm not gonna read this all to you, right? There's a bunch of different ones that I got here, and a bunch of different concerns that were launched for why this was happening. It's a counterproductive, counterintuitive thing that was happening. And ultimately a lot of it got blocked, but it was a real concern. And there's many other things that we could talk about to list here. That's just a couple of them. Anyways, we're gonna stop the video here, but we're gonna get into some of the whys later. I just wanted to set up some of the things that I think I could point to as problematic, and some people might have good arguments for why some of these things have happened. But I would say that at least, even if you just gave me a few of these, it would make my argument. My point would be that there are some policies, that some interests that are actually counterintuitive to our flourishing as humans, as people in the West, as a culture, as a nation. And it begs the question as to why do we do this? Why does this happen in our nations? Why does this happen in our society? Why is this happening in our civilization? Why are we even encouraging these things and festering these things? Why are these policies that seem nonsensical and backwards to our flourishing, to our self-interest and those type of things? And that's what we're gonna answer in the next video. Now, how do I want to end this one, since I didn't plan on ending here? I want to say that, the world is massively complicated, massively complex, and there's a lot of pieces on the board that's playing out, right? And so when we look into these things, again, we try to be as thorough as we can to figure out what we're talking about. But it is something worth discussing. It is something worth analyzing to try to see if we could figure out how to approach things, to try to get our minds wrapped around things, so that when we're having conversations with people too, so that we could be informed about what's happening, and so that we can also be able to help to know how to navigate not only the conversations, but navigate life, and how to vote, how to you know what I mean, what to pray about and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, anyways, that's it for this one. I just left you guys with a whole bunch of conundrums, and we'll try to work those things out in the next video. The next video is gonna be cool, man. It should have been in this video actually. We're gonna look at like the Muslim Brotherhood and some of their statements. We're gonna look at connections between various enemy groups and how what their sort of agendas are and how they plan on implementing these agendas. And really, it'll start to answer these questions. It'll start to show you why the education system is educating our youths against us, why the education system is turning out these liberal weirdos that are basically just trying to like destroy, you know, our society and our civilization, and pulling they're basically like infesting and infecting the minds of our kids and people against us in our colleges, our campuses, our universities, you know what I mean? And you know, there is a lot of connections there. There's a lot of reading, and it's a lot of fun stuff to think about. And once I get into it, it'll be super, like, you'll actually see the evidence for what I'm saying. You'll actually see these things being played out, and you'll actually see how they implement them. You know what I mean? So stay tuned for that. Respects for watching this video. I hope you just think about some of these things. You know what I'm saying? And I hope that, you know, you gain something from this video anyways. But you don't know, if you rock with Daily Boys content, do feel free to, you know, like and share and comment and do all that other good stuff. God bless y'all. Take care.